Alright, so a lot has happened since my last video on Once Upon a Time. The show simultaneously debunked my old theory while half confirming my new theory, and before the next episode airs, I'm going to review my ideas on Neverland, and how my prediction of its very random return was correct. Hello, I'm the Theorizer, and I want to get through this as quickly as I possibly can because there is a lot to cover, and expect a bunch of upcoming videos on Once Upon a Time as the season is coming to a close. Let's begin. So I want to start by providing even more evidence to support that the Dark Realm is Neverland. Watch that video first before this one. Anyways. A few hours after I uploaded that theory, a new episode aired where they introduced a new location known as Pleasure Island. Twitter user @xpler779 tied the concept of Pleasure Island to my Neverland theory. They made quite an interesting comparison as they pointed out how Hook said that Pleasure Island has direct ties to Neverland. And that is something quite bizarre if you ask me, but look at it. Pleasure Island is another child trap. It's a freaking circus. Also, Rumpel refuses to go near it, calling it a land of temptation. More evidence that Neverland is the Black Fairies is that Greg and Tamara call it the motherlode of all magic. And who do we know to be the most powerful character on the entire show? The Black Fairy. We know she's more powerful than Rumpel, as even he can't access the Dark Realm, and according to the Blue Fairy, he's not even powerful enough to create something like the Dark Curse. But do you know who is? The Black Fairy. And they recently revealed that she did indeed create it. The one thing that I do find bizarre is that Neverland was only nighttime temporarily, during the time when Emma and the gang were there. In all flashbacks and in the recent episode, Neverland was back to daytime. I'm not too sure as to why this was, but I'll keep pondering it over. Perhaps it was to symbolize how kids came in their dreams, which are at nighttime. Another thing I found odd is that apparently a bunch of Lost Boys stayed in Neverland. In the recent episode, they were chasing Hook and Blackbeard. We were never hinted at this being the case in the past, but suddenly they're just here. Or perhaps it's because the Black Fairy is in Neverland. We finally got a shot of the Dark Realm in a recent episode, and it looks a bit like Neverland. Ever since Peter Pan left the place, it turned from a jungle into more of a forest, which is sort of what we see with the Dark Realm. Notice how Rumpel says the same lines for both Neverland and the Dark Realm. He says, "Anything is possible." Indeed, this is true for both locations, but as we know, the possibilities are mostly regulated by the rulers of the land, Pan and the Black Fairy. The one thing people were confused on with my last theory was that Gideon aged 28 years in the Dark Realm, whereas nobody aged in Neverland. But here's the thing. The way time flows doesn't need to be the same in all areas of the Dark Realm. It can be changed and molded like a fluid. That's the only point Rumpel ever makes on the Dark Realm, so it all works around the Black Fairy. And now comes the massive part of my theory, which I have very little evidence for. I have been guessing for a while now who it was that gave Snow White the Once Upon a Time book. She just kept saying how it randomly appeared in her closet. Well, we know that nobody had magic in Storybrooke to do that, and the only other thing that could have done that is something Regina calls fate. She says that Emma and Lily being tied together was the high powers of fate. They say that Emma and Neil meeting was a part of the high powers of fate, and that the wolf constantly stopping Emma's car was also fate. Basically, anything that unrealistically happens in the series is explained off with fate, but I'm thinking that it may be the Black Fairy all along, trying to move along the story, getting it to the very end as quick as she can. Now, of course, I have no evidence for her being the one to tie together Emma and Lily's souls, or that she forced Neil to meet Emma, but I do have ideas for the book appearing. The Black Fairy can appear anywhere she wants, in any realm at any point. She can appear out of the shadows, but it tends to pull her back in for a short amount of time. But if it's enough time to steal children, then it's certainly enough time to appear from the shadows of a dimly lit closet and place a book right there for Snow White to find, therefore breaking the curse and moving along the story into the final battle involving her. If you check out the final battle BTS pics, you can see Henry in a neck brace, which is odd, to say the least, but you also see the Black Fairy's actress, Jamie Murray. Wait, I think that's Jamie Murray. I honestly can't tell, but if it is, we can see her holding the book in her hand, implying that she has some sort of connection to it. Mysterious. But I don't want to dwell on it, I just wanted to throw that idea out there for now. For those of you who disagree with the Neverland theory, there is also the possibility that Neverland is just a holding location for kids who are no longer needed in the Dark Realm. The Black Fairy just throws them there to savor them, and she keeps the shadows watching them. As Wendy Darling says, it's called Neverland because once you set foot on its soil, the shadow never lets you leave. Sounds kind of like how the Black Fairy gets pulled into the Dark Realm, no? Speaking of the Black Fairy's banishment, in previous theories I proposed that it was because of her affairs with Peter Pan, causing the Black Fairy to lose her child and forcing her to want to compensate with Gideon, trying to make him her new son. And the Blue Fairy clearly hates her fairies having affairs with other creatures. I mean, look no further than Nova and Grumpy. But as the Black Fairy says, the thing keeping her locked in the Dark Realm is the sword known as Fronting, which is the red jeweled sword. In the most recent episode, she finally escapes, but my theory is that the Blue Fairy created the sword to banish her, and perhaps all evil is banished with this sword, which is why all heroes think they can use it to win everything. Perhaps it was the sword that banished the evil queen in, the Wish reality. Old Snow and Old Charming state how it was the Blue Fairy who saw to it that the evil queen was permanently banished. Perhaps via hunting? We see the cringy Sir Henry trying to use the sword on Regina, proving that it is indeed also in the Wish realm, and that he figured it could destroy her, so perhaps I'm right. But speaking of Regina and the Black Fairy, notice their eerie amount of similarities. Regina used to constantly go on about how Henry was her son, despite the fact that he wasn't quite her son. Just like the Black Fairy, she also does this but with Gideon. Even the way they dress and act are similar. Or how about the similarities with her son? That creepy but hilarious giggle, and the prominent usage of the word dearie. They weren't lying when they said that this nutcase was the ultimate villain of the series. That final battle Rumpel mentioned to Snow and Charming? Yeah, that was not about them and Regina. As denoted by the literal name of the Season 6 finale, they call it the final battle. The ultimate villain of Once Upon a Time, and I've been hyped for this character for the several seasons they've been teasing her, since the Dark Fairy Dust Snow White used early in the first season to the wand which all other fairies seem to fear. This psycho has been my favorite of all of them. But we could compare the Black Fairy to Regina and Rumpel, but what about Emma? Notice the symbolism they both share. They both squish a bug in the same episode, or how the Black Fairy is the villain to the savior, or how she created the curse and Emma was born to break it. They are true opposites. Maybe it's the Black Fairy who's truly under the hood in Emma's vision, because as we all know, the little battle she and Gideon already had is not the same one. Now, I have other theories, such as how the apprentice is actually Lily's father, what with how he lived next to Maleficent and said that she'd never go near his house, mentored Lily like she was his daughter, and much more. But instead, I have a rather ingenious theory as to how this season will end. The creators constantly claimed that this will be the finale of Henry's book. Not necessarily the finale to the series, but just this book. And as Isaac says, nobody wants to be around when the ending occurs. I bet everyone would get sucked into the book. So I am theorizing that they will lower the town line, once and for all. They've been teasing it for seasons, let alone the fact that they just brought the concept back into the series when Wish Robin and Zelina wanted to escape. And I believe that all of the characters will find their happiness out in the land without magic, perhaps even taking all of the magic with them as it floods out into the world. Since the Black Fairy is not acting in the second half of the season finale, we can assume that she is defeated, triggering the end of the book. But perhaps the 4 actors who have confirmed they'll be in the potential season 7 get wrapped up in it and sucked in. And many on the internet have theorized that the new actor coming in the end of the season finale is Henry, all grown up, and that he'll have to save his family. But from what? Being locked in the book, perhaps. Finally, what is the Black Fairy's obsession with the number 28? She raised Gideon for 28 years until finally testing him. The age Emma breaks the curse at is 28. And the time, 8:15, has some unexplained significance which has never been explained throughout the series. Emma has Henry at 8:15. Emma stays in Storybrooke at 8:15, as well as Storybrooke being frozen for 28 years at 8:15. August's legs turn into wood at 8:15. Neil lands in London at 8:15. I could go on and on, but there is an episode in season 1 known as 7:15, which bugs me that they didn't put it at 8:15, but perhaps it was daylight saving time or something ridiculous like that. I looked into the Bible verses with 8:15 and looked into the symbolic meaning of 28, but found not a whole lot. But I hope they reveal these things in the season finale. Perhaps they're references to other shows the creators have worked on. Yeah, probably. Anyways, holy crap, this was long. See ya.